Okay, so aloha mai kākou, everyone. I just want to talk about the documentation of the ʻUaʻu on Mauna Kea. And just to clarify, this is not an ʻUaʻu, it's just a pretty seabird picture here on the cover. It's a wedge-tailed shearwater. Just so you know that I know how to identify these birds. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background information, this is Mauna Kea. So here you can see the island of Hawaii, and then it's kind of in the northeast section of the island. And then try to keep in mind, if you can remember, these two locations. So this is in the northeast section of Mauna Kea. This is Pu'u Kanakaleo Nui. And down here in the southeast section is Pu'u Kole. So try to remember this and kind of keep this spatially oriented in your minds. So just to kind of go into what the target birds were that we were looking for on Mauna Kea. So we had these 3 species of endangered seabirds in Hawaii that are known to nest in these inland locations. And so the first one is the Ake'akē, or the band-rump storm petrel, and then we have the ʻUaʻu, which is the Hawaiian petrel, and the ʻAʻo, or the newel shearwater. And so we are looking for all 3 of these species, but we kind of dropped out the newel shearwater because they aren't known to historically have been on Mauna Kea, but we are looking for them just in case. So just to give you a little historical information on the ʻUaʻu, so in the early 1900s, they actually thought that the ʻUaʻu was extinct statewide. And at the time, they thought it was a subpopulation of the dark-rumped petrel, but they originally thought that it was extinct at that time. But then, fast forward into the 1950s, they actually discovered a population of them nesting on the Big Island here in the Saddle region, kind of where this red range zone is now. And then they later found them on the summit of Haleakala, and then further on they found them throughout the state in several other locations. After the 1950s, they tracked the populations on Mauna Kea up until the 1960s, and then at that point they believed that they were extirpated from the mountain by 1963. That's when the last known breeding birds were found at Pu'ukole. And here you can see they rudely ripped them out of their burrows just to confirm that they were there. And then a little bit of historical information about the Ake'akē. They were historically abundant on all of the islands, including Kaho'olawe, which is a little island as part of Maui Nui. But today they're thought to be restricted to Kauai, Maui, and Hawaii Island, although as we learned, they were recently detected on Lanai, so they may be in greater locations. And we know that they breed in very small, isolated locations, and they're very, very difficult to locate. So as of 2016, that was the first time that one of these band-rump storm petrel nests was actually located, and that was again in that Saddle region area in between Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea on Hawaii Island. So some of my the major study objectives that we had were to survey the university and nearby lands on Mauna Kea. So that's most of the summit area, and then down into the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve, which surrounds that. And then we wanted to really identify the species that are using Mauna Kea. So we really wanted to figure out what species are there and what species may be still using this environment. And it's notable to note that it's a very huge area. It's almost the size of Kauai if you take the entire area of Mauna Kea. So we're surveying a very large area, so it takes some time and effort to locate these birds. And then if we do locate the birds, we wanted to figure out important habitat areas that these species may be using. So we kind of tackled this by a couple different methods. So the first thing that we did was use radar. So we have a Furuno radar unit that's truck mounted, and we basically drive this around the perimeter of the mountain, and we do radar surveys. So these start about 15 minutes before sunset and go to about 2.5 hours after sunset. And this is just to try to correspond with the arrival period of both the band-rump storm petrels and the Hawaiian petrel, storm petrels and the Hawaiian petrels. And then we made note of any targets observed, and then we tried to track their speed, and directionality. And then we tried to verify with ground observers, but it's pretty difficult up there because it can be below 30s in the nighttime periods while we're surveying. So it's cold and it's difficult to locate birds. So, and this is just kind of an example of our radar site map. So this is on the east side of Mauna Kea, and so our radar reaches about 1.5 kilometers. And so we basically tried to line up all the survey points so that they overlap slightly, so that we could look for peak areas of activity. Unfortunately, we did run into some pretty big problems, and from what I understand, this is pretty common with radar. Is it's difficult to distinguish between targets. And on almost every site on Mauna Kea, we would get just hundreds and hundreds of targets flying around at night. And so we We don't know exactly what they are right now, but the leading hypothesis is moths. The other hypothesis is that it's the spirits of the Hawaiian birds that have deceased from rats, cats, and mosquitoes. But that's yet to be proven. So that's our from what our understanding is of our radar surveys. So unfortunately, it's very, very difficult to pick out any possible bird targets with the techniques that we're using right now, just because we have so many of these mystery flying targets going by at almost every site. So then we moved on to using our automated song recorders. So we're using the Wildlife Acoustic SM4 recorders, and we have a total of 10 recorders right now, but hopefully we'll get some more as we identify locations. And so last year we surveyed a total of 20 sites, and we recorded for about 8 hours a day, both in the evening and in the early morning, just to try to get some of those transient birds potentially. And so we placed these recorders out at about 1 month intervals, so we were trying to catch a large period of time before we moved them to other locations. So, and here's just kind of a map of some of the areas that we did survey, and we really focused on putting the recorders on the pu'us, or these cinder cones, because these seem to be congregating areas for these birds on Mauna Loa. They seem to kind of gather in these areas and socialize before heading out into their breeding areas. And so we really targeted a lot of these pu'us here, where we had a lot of radar activity, and this is where we had our 4 possible seabird sightings, and then we targeted this group of pu'us here as well. And so here, just kind of getting into some of our preliminary results. So this is pretty ongoing research, but we did detect ʻUaʻu. So that was pretty exciting, and that was up in that Pu'u Kanakaleo area. So that's the first recording of those birds there since 1963. And we had them from May through August, so they're there for a pretty good chunk of time. And they probably would have been there longer, but we had a hurricane come in August that made the road impassable, so we weren't able to get more recorders out. And then we also had Ake'akē, the band-rump storm petrels, at that elevation at Pu'u Kanakaleo. And then here's just kind of a list of some of the other birds that we detected at these high elevation areas, as well as the birds that we were able to detect by radar and verify visually. So just kind of going into our ʻUaʻu at Pu'u Kanakaleo. So we had recorders out from May through August, like I said, and birds were detected every month that they were deployed. So it's pretty exciting to have them there. And it's also pretty exciting too, because Kanakaleo is the large voice of the native man, basically. And so it's kind of cool that we're getting the voices of the ʻUaʻu at this important cultural site. And then it's also important to note that it's just under 10,000 feet in elevation here. So these birds are going pretty far up compared to other areas in their range. And it's also important to note too that this is near one of the historical observations of these birds. In the 1950s, they had ʻUaʻu kind of on that eastern flank of Mauna Kea. So, and then here, just so you all can get as excited as I was when I heard this, this is the first call of the ʻUaʻu on Mauna Kea since 1963. So yeah, so I was pretty excited when I got that. And I actually got the news when I was hiking around at like 13,000 feet looking for other ones, so it was a good day. But anyway, so and then there you can really hear how they got their Hawaiian name when they do that. So yeah, that's how they got that ʻUaʻu name. So then kind of moving forward into what our plan is for our 2019 field season. So we're hoping to do a lot more. So this, like I said before, this is pretty preliminary stuff that we were working with. But we're really hoping to update our radar system. So we're fortunate that we're going to have some folks coming in from USGS that are going to help us automate our system, so that we're going to have a video graphics card that'll actually take screen grabs from the radar screen. And so hopefully we'll be able to develop algorithms from that and be able to really fine tune what all of these targets are. So we'll be able to distinguish whether it's moths, bats, insects, band-rump storm petrels, ʻUaʻu, or our spirit birds. So hopefully we can figure that out. And then we also have our song recorders that are deployed. So we're going to be deploying those for hopefully the entire breeding season at Kanakaleo, just to really narrow down and see if they are using that area for that whole period, and really try to see if potentially there is a colony on Mauna Kea. And then we're also going to be spreading the recorders over a larger landscape, potentially targeting the northern side of Mauna Kea, because it seems like both historically and from what we've observed now, there's 3 areas of younger age substrate on Mauna Kea, and it seems to be that's where the birds are congregating. So we're going to try to survey all of those areas of younger substrate and hopefully locate additional birds or potentially burrows. And then also we're going to be doing some ground surveys to look for guano and burrows. And we did find some guano around the base of Kanakalea this year, but we weren't able to locate any burrows from that. But it also could potentially be barn owls. They're pretty common in that area, and so we're not sure whether it's seabird or barn owl guano that we've seen. So with that, I would just like to thank all of my partners and supporters in this project, and yeah, mahalo. So yeah, and if anybody's interested too, here's just kind of a map of the geography. So these areas are kind of the spots where we really want to target, because this is the younger substrate that I was mentioning earlier. So.